Hello Dram fans, myself like a lot of you, I have been limiting my whiskey purchases recently, but this one got me. This one I think is massive news. This is a very important release. This is essentially a cask strength version of Ledaig 10, and you do have to wonder why they didn't just call this Ledaig 10 cask strength, because that is what it appears to be, or maybe there's more to it than that. This is Ledaig Hebridean Moon. So this is exactly the kind of whiskey that I've been asking for from distilleries for several years now. I've given up a little bit on wanting older age statements to return, or to return at more reasonable prices, because it seems like that's just not going to happen. And when we have seen age statements return on things like Ledaig 18 recently, they just don't live up to the quality of the older bottlings. Time and time again, when we've had the return of an older age statement or the introduction of an older age statement, we're just let down with something which is more expensive and substandard compared to what we hoped for. So perhaps instead we should all be asking for better presented, perhaps cask strength or more naturally presented versions of what we already have. And that's exactly what Ledaig Tobermory have done here. Ledaig Hebridean Moon, it's got a 10-year-old age statement. We're told that it's matured in second fill bourbon casks. It is natural colour, and a lot of you whiskey geeks out there will know that Ledaig and Tobermory didn't always adopt the practice of natural colour on their whiskey. If you get one of their bottles from a few years ago, it probably will contain some artificial colouring. But more recently, Ledaig have moved over to natural colouring, and I'm really pleased to say that they've even opted to include that guarantee on the label here. I can give you a little close-up of that. No added colour, non-chill filtered. It's bottled, as you can see there, at 58.8% ABV. It is a full 700ml bottle. It is cask strength, bourbon cask matured. Ledaig Hebridean Moon. Show you a little close-up of the box as well, in case you want to see the information that they've given us there, rather than me repeating all of it. So I can just go over the critical parts. I think that it's really great that we're getting this from Tobermory or Ledaig, and I really hope that a lot of other distilleries are going to follow suit. I think I speak for a lot of the whiskey enthusiast community when I say that these things are really appreciated, because quality of presentation and the quality of the spirit really matter, and ABV really matters, because ABV is flavour. You may have seen that it does say limited edition on the bottle and the box for this stuff. Whether that means it'll be around for a while or not, or maybe an annual release, we don't know. Personally, I really hope that this one is going to be an annual release. But essentially what they've given us here is a cask strength version of that wonderful 10-year-old. So let's get right into it. Let's get some in the glass and see what we've got. As with all cask strength whiskey, you don't necessarily need a lot in the glass. So probably a little bit less than a single there, which is more than enough, because at that higher ABV, it allows you to take your time, take smaller sips, get more flavour per sip, and you don't have to drink as much. You don't have to get as drunk, it's not as harmful to your health. High strength whiskey, if you're drinking sensibly and responsible, is better for you. It's better for your wallet, it's better for the flavour, and it's potentially less harmful to your health. When governments put heavy duties on high ABV spirits and try to discourage stronger alcohol, I can see what they're getting at, but for sensible consumers of whiskey like myself, and hopefully like you, it's kind of missing the point. If you want an alcohol to demonise and go after for its harmful effects on your health, then possibly look at mixed drinks rather than the premium quality stuff like this that people like you and I are sitting at home sipping respectfully and sensibly and carefully. Anyway, rant over. Ledaig Hebridean Moon on the nose. Definitely a more coastal, drier, slightly more ballsy, natural, more raw and more robust spirit than what you get on the standard 46.3% 10-year-old. Very coastal, dry, salty, and more medicinal than the 46.3% 10. Getting notes of wet gravel, sea spray, rock pools, and hospital floor cleaner. Quite a note of mint in there as well, which is something that quite often pops up on higher strength, heavily peated whiskey. So a note of mint and a sweet and sugary mint, a little bit of a mint toothpaste and sugary Kendall mint cake note. Lots of smokiness as well. Definitely a very heavily peated whiskey, as you would expect. Notes of wood smoke and charcoal barbecue. A little bit of fruity maltiness cutting through the mix there, which is always good. It's nice to see that the malt hasn't been overshadowed by the peat. Lovely fruity maltiness. But this one, it has to be said, it is a very peat-forward whiskey, which is mainly about the peat. At least, that's the story at full strength, because I am drinking this I'm nosing at the moment, at the full strength of 58.8, which is absolutely fine. Let's see how it tastes. It's actually a really pleasantly surprising sweet lemony maltiness creeps up on you on the arrival on the palate. After that quite dry, medicinal and salty and mineral notes on the nose, you get a big burst of that wonderful fruity lemony malt. But again, very, very medicinal on palate. Lots and lots of really heavy peat, quite smoky, and lots of coal tar soap. Medicinal, carbolic on the palate of this one. Mixing in seamlessly and beautifully with lots of sweet caramel. Although probably not as much sweet caramel as you get on the slightly more rounded and sweeter 46.3% 10-year-old. Dry wood smoke on the palate. Salty, good salinity, herbal, and a really pleasant salted licorice flavour. Going to have one more sip and look at the finish. Beautiful contrast of light and bright lemony maltiness, quite salty, but also a beautifully dark smokiness. Lovely and sweet, very long finish, incredible whiskey. Ledaig, I don't know why I haven't reviewed the 10-year-old yet. I don't know if I've actually reviewed anything from Tobermory yet, apart from the Rioja Sinclair series, which itself was incredibly surprising. You wouldn't think that a heavily peated whiskey finished in a Rioja cask would be any good, but it really is. Ledaig is some of the best whiskey that you can buy these days. It's probably the best peated whiskey that you can get outside of Islay, and if you included Islay in that, it holds its own against the best that Islay has to offer as well. The unpeated stuff from Tobermory, I think that's come on in leaps and bounds. It's good stuff. But Ledaig, the peated stuff, is just phenomenal. Now, I am going to do something which I don't always do, and I don't always believe in, but I am going to do it this time. I'm going to try this whiskey with a little bit of water added to dilute it a little bit, partly because someone in the comments will say that I should and it improves the experience, but also because I always do. I do always believe in trying any whiskey which is stronger than about 48-50%. I always at least try it with added water before I do my review. A lot of the time I don't think that it really adds anything to the experience, but I've tried this with water already, and I think that this is a case where it really does. And I think that it's something that's really worth doing. So I've got my calibrated pure water source here. It's bottled mineral water. People occasionally ask me what water I use to dilute whiskey, and I think it depends on where you live. I live in the east of England, southeast of England, I guess, and our tap water here is not neutral. It will ruin a whiskey because it's really got its own flavour, and it's not good for diluting whiskey. If you live somewhere like Scotland where your tap water basically is mineral water, then have at it. But if you're like me and you live somewhere where your tap water has a flavour, I would recommend getting whatever quality bottled mineral water you can find, tasting it to assess whether it has its own flavour, because not all mineral water is equal. Find one which is as neutral as possible, buy a job lot of it and stick to it. Experiment with it, and if you're happy with it, keep using that water. So this water here, which I'm not going to mention what it is, I've tried this before. I think that it's neutral, it's suitable for diluting whiskey, so that's what I'm going to use. And I'm going to fudge this a little bit. I'm not being as careful as I would be if I was critically tasting something, making notes for a review, but I'm going to add the smallest quantity that I can. And that's probably plenty there. Let's get rid of that. And I'm going to have a cut in the video so that I can allow that a little bit of time to marry and open up. I'm going to hold it in my hand as well to put a little bit of warmth into the whiskey. So I'm going to give that some time, and I will see you after the cut. Welcome back, whiskey fans. I've given that some time in the glass now to warm up and marry and open up and integrate that water into the spirit so that it's one homogeneous thing to taste properly, because you do get some odd flavours if you add water and drink it straight away. These things take time. This stuff has been 10 years in the cask. The least we can do is give it a few minutes in the glass to open up. But I think that this is probably ready now. So let's get the watch glass off the top and do some nosing of Ledaig Hebridean Moon, but this time watered down probably to around 46%, high 40s. And if you're wondering, I did do this a little bit more scientifically when I was doing my notes, because dilution is a real science and it pays to do it properly. Ledaig Hebridean Moon with water added on the nose. I think that the water has taken a little bit of the edge off it, as you might expect. It's a little bit less salty and a little bit less coastal now. It's a little bit more warming. I think it's moved a little bit more in a little bit of a Laphroaig direction, with a little bit more sweetness and a little bit more of the bourbon influence showing. Getting some more warming, sweet, peppery peat on the nose now, as well as some more of the maltiness coming through. Similar to a Laphroaig style of peat, and is also similar to the 46.3% of the Ledaig, but still with that dry oakiness, which I'm assuming is from those refill casks. They tell us that this stuff is matured in refill bourbon casks. I believe it's 100% refill bourbon, and I don't remember off the top of my head what casks they say that they use in the normal, regular 10-year-old, if they do, but I would imagine that this has got a higher percentage of refill in the maturation. At least that's what it seems like. Because even with water, this still has that dry oakiness, which I would associate with refill. I think that the malt is starting to come out a little bit more now that the water is added as well. Lovely bright and sweet maltiness. Very fruity now. I think that really the peat has been toned down a little bit, which is not a bad thing because it just gives the other elements of this whiskey some room to stretch his legs. Lovely soft oranginess, sweet peat, That coastal and saltiness, that salty quality is still there. But no, it's just a little bit subdued and letting the other elements come through. Lovely, gentle smokiness. I think that the smokiness on this, when it has some water added, it's kind of like what you would get standing next to a smoke shack, like a smoker, rather than the undiluted experience where it's like standing in the midst of a roaring bonfire. And getting a little bit more of a smoked fish no and medicinal bandages coming through in the peatiness of this, now that I've added water. Smoked fish and bandages. Sounds like a really truly terrible dinner, but a really great whiskey. Let's see how it tastes, with water added this time. Dry refill oak, which some people are going to think sounds terrible because a lot of people these days have been conditioned to think that good whiskey casks have to be first fill and that refill casks are tired, clapped out casks that shouldn't be used anymore. But that's really not the case, because I think that if you give a quality refill cask a long enough maturation, it gives the spirit itself a chance to talk. And I really like a whiskey with a proper dry oaky edge compared to a first fill whiskey, which tends to be more about the previous contents of the cask rather than the whiskey that you're making. I myself love a really good refill whiskey, and I think that the refill casks in this one have worked wonders. I think that slightly subdued and drier oakiness that you get on the palate of this one with water, I think that the dry salinity and minerality of this with water adds a little bit more of a Lagavulin 12 cask strength direction, which may be a good or a bad thing. I think that this with water is a little less sharp and bracing, with less mint and a little bit more caramel sweetness when you add water. I would also say that what I assume is the refill cask influence on this one probably does make this taste a little bit less mature and a little bit less rounded compared to the 46.3% 10-year-old, which to me is neither a good nor a bad thing. I think that you lose a little bit of that rounded profile, but you gain a little bit more robust intensity. Neither good nor bad, just a different experience. Let's have one more sip and look at the finish with water. Salted licorice, and just a really lovely gentle smokiness. Getting some sweet pipe tobacco on the finish, trailing off into a really sweet, gently smoky maltiness. With water, I think that this Ledaig Hebridean Moon, I think it starts to show some really nice maltiness. And as you add water, you remove some of that hard, dry, mineral, salty edge, and it makes it a little bit more rounded and a little bit more approachable. I think this is a really great whiskey to try at a lot of different ABVs. I think that it's a really fun one, and that just adds another little extra aspect to this whiskey, another little value for money point. More often than not, I prefer not to add water to my whiskey, but I think that with this one, it's a really rewarding thing to do. So, is this Ledaig Hebridean Moon the same cask recipe that they use for the 46.3% 10-year-old? At first glance, it would seem so, because it says that it's 100% bourbon casks, but on the box of this, it does say that they are second fill bourbon casks. And I think that might be a little clue as to a deliberate choice, because this does seem to me to be more distillate driven with less fresh bourbon influence than the current 10-year-old. We're also told that this spirit is from the first spirit runs after the installation of the current stills over at Tobermory, which were put in 2014. So that might also be having an effect on this spirit, making it different to older bottles of the 10-year-old. Hard to say. But like I said, I have been hoping and praying for cask strength versions of great standard whiskey like the Ledaig 10 and the Ardbeg 10 for quite a while now. I think that when you get a cask strength version of these fantastic whiskies, it's like saying, same again please, but more. And I think that this Ledaig Hebridean Moon both is and isn't that. I think that for fans of the standard 46.3% 10-year-old, this gives you a more intense version that you can add water to tailor it to your exact preference. Although, to be fair, at a questionable price increase. But it is also a slightly different experience with a slightly different maturation to what you get from the standard 10. And I think that you really have to talk about price with this one. The standard 10-year-old, the regular core expression that we've had forever, that is bottled at 46.3%. This one's bottled this time at 58.8. So you're talking about a roughly 27% increase in ABV. The normal 10-year-old sells for about £43, at least here in the UK. This stuff sells for £85. So you're looking at a 100% increase in price for a 27% increase in ABV, which, when you put it like that, kind of seems like a little bit of a rip-off. It's kind of hard to justify. And me personally, I've swung back and forth multiple times on this one since I've been tasting and really enjoying this, but I've been deliberating about whether I think that this is worth the substantial increased price or not. And I think that I've come to the conclusion that I think that it's both not good value for money and also totally worth buying. I think that really has the same problems that we had, or that I had, with the Bunnahabhain 12 cask strength release, in that both the standard 46.3% version of Ledaig and Bunnahabhain 12 are both damn near perfect whiskies. They're really so perfect that you don't really need an improved version. But at the same time, the standard version is so perfect and so great that why would you not want this? If you're watching this and thinking about this one and thinking that it's a lot of money, that £85 is a lot of money for a bottle of whiskey, because it is, we need to acknowledge that £85 is a hell of a lot of money to pay for a bottle of drink, because that's all it is. Then I would say that for you price-conscious whiskey enthusiasts out there, just get the 10-year-old or the Rioja cask and just enjoy it. They are every bit as good as this Ledaig Hebridean Moon. You don't need this one, and if you give this a miss and stick with a much more affordable 10 and Sinclair Series Rioja cask, you won't be missing out. On the other hand, if you're looking to spend a little under £100 on a special bottle and you appreciate your heavily peated cask strength whiskey, then this is a really great whiskey. It's really not that it's better than the standard 10-year-old, which is perfect already. But what you're really getting for your money with this one is a slight variation in that house style, which is interesting enough in itself, and the ability to fine-tune the ABV to your exact preference. You do also, in my opinion, get the nice little bonus that with this, adding water does really change the flavours. I think that this Hebridean Moon, it really swims fantastically well, and it shifts and changes like a chameleon as you add varying amounts of water, which is another little added bonus. So comparing this to other whiskies, I think that you really have to compare this to some of the cask strength releases from Islay, and I think that it sums it up pretty well if I say that I think that this sits very nicely midway between what could be seen as the two big boys of heavily peated cask strength Islay whiskey, and that's Laphroaig 10 cask strength and Lagavulin 12 cask strength. In my opinion, when you buy a bottle of Ledaig 10, the standard 46.3, I think that it gives you more of a Laphroaig profile with lots of sweet bourbon influence. I think that this new Hebridean Moon is much more dry and austere with more raw and boisterous peat, moving it a little bit closer to a Lagavulin 12 profile. Although saying that, I think that Lagavulin 12 is not what it was. So if you are a suffering Lagavulin 12 fan, especially with the price where it is now, I think that this is well worth a look at. But I think that if you love either of those two giants of Islay, the Laphroaig 10 cask strength or the Lagavulin 12 cask strength, then I think that you'll absolutely love this one too. We should probably also say a little word about this compared to Ledaig 18, which itself can be had for about the same price as this, maybe even a little bit less. But really, between this and Ledaig 18, you have such a different cask recipe. You could almost say that the cask recipe and the house profile that goes into Ledaig 18 is almost the opposite of what goes into this. And I think that Ledaig 18, those extra 8 years in the cask have a really profound effect on Ledaig 18. It is one of the very few remaining 18-year-old whiskies that really taste like a properly aged 18-year-old, in my opinion. 18-year-old Scotch has, in my opinion, kind of seen its day. I think that a lot of what we're being offered on the market now with contemporary 18-year-old Scotch is really, really not worth buying. You're really not getting much in addition to what you get from the 10 and the 12 expressions from that distillery. But with Ledaig, you really are. You're really getting something special with a Ledaig 18, which is significantly different and in some ways better than the younger expressions. Ledaig 18 is incredible whiskey at a great price, but it really can't be compared to this. They are just such entirely different things. My advice, if you want the best value Ledaig there is out there, then get the 10-year-old, the standard, cheaper, 46.3% one. That is where the value lies. If you really want to experience the absolute best that Ledaig, that Peated Tobermory has to offer, get a bottle of the standard 10 and a bottle of the 18 as well, because they're very different things and they're both incredible. And finally, if you are, like me a little bit, just a little bit obsessed with Ledaig and really hooked on their wonderful peated whiskies, and you want to branch out a little bit, and you've perhaps maybe already enjoyed the 10 and 18, I think that's when you need to be looking at the Sinclair series, Rioja cask, and probably one of these as well. Comparing this to Ledaig 10, which we should probably also mention, which I've kind of already done in the tasting notes, I think that the standard regular 46er is really more sweet, more rounded, more easygoing. And I am sort of seeing a common theme here with Distel, or whatever Distel's called now, that when they do a cask strength release, like they did with the Bunnahabhain 12 cask strength, it seems like they like to make the cask strength have a little bit more edge, a little bit more dry, a little bit more challenging, which is kind of understandable. And I think that Hebridean Moon really has that. It's more raw, it's more salty and coastal, it's a little bit more rugged. It's also slightly more peat focused than the regular 46% 10-year-old. But I really wouldn't say that it's peatier or better than the standard 10-year-old, because that Ledaig 10 at 46.3, it's really the perfect peat bomb as is. So there you have it. There is my opinion on this wonderful, wonderful Ledaig Hebridean Moon, which, if you are a card-carrying Ledaig fanatic, it's an easy purchase, really. Although it would have been nice to see it at a slightly lower price, perhaps more in line with the increase in ABV. But there you go. Don't feel like you missed out on this one. If price matters, stick with the standard. So, Hebridean Moon, buy it, don't buy it, your choice. No wrong answers. What I will say though is that I think that this makes a lot more sense than the Bunnahabhain 12 cask strength. I really don't feel the need for a cask strength Bunna 12 in my life when the standard Bunna 12 is already that perfect. But I am really, really enjoying having this one. And I think that's partly because I really prefer my peated whiskey to be intense, and I think that a cask strength offering really offers you that. Personally, because the price of this is so much higher than the standard 10, I think I will buy this as an occasional indulgence. It's really not a mandatory purchase over the 10 in my opinion. It's a nice to have. rather than a must-have. It's very, very good whiskey, probably some of the best peated whiskey that you can buy. But it's all going to come down to whether you have an extra £40 to throw at something which is a slight improvement and a minor variation of that 10 that we all know and love. Thanks for watching. Thanks for coming with me on this little comparison of Hebridean Moon and the rest of the Ledaig range. I hope it's been helpful in allowing some of you guys to choose whether you think this is worth £85. Let me know what you think in the comments, what you think of this one if you've been lucky enough to try it. Or perhaps you don't care about this one because you're happy with what you already get from the 10. Also let me know what you think in the comments about these cask strength whiskies, because as I said at the start of this video, I kind of feel like cask strength is kind of replacing age statements in whiskey these days, because age statements are becoming so difficult to make and source and stock and so expensive that I think a lot of people and a lot of distilleries are really turning their back on the idea of letting casks sit for 20 or 30 years. Or if they are doing that, they're putting such a premium on them. But really, the quality option in whiskey now, the premium treat yourself bottle, more often than not tends to be these better presented options, which I like because I enjoy things like this. But I also kind of miss my 18, 20, 25-year-old whiskies. So let me know what you think about that too. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Cheers.